Good evening, everybody. My name is Bria. I am the chair of the Bylaws Committee. I'm going to call this meeting to order at 6:31 p.m. on October 27th, 2025. Angel, if you could go to the next slide. All right, I'm going to just observe some ground rules before we begin. No one may speak until granted the floor. CB11 members, if you have a question about board business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand and wait to be recognized. To raise your hand through Zoom, click the participants icon and you will find the raise hand function there. Members should not engage in a back and forth discussion. The chair will recognize the next person to speak. Please keep your questions and comments brief and on topic to discussion. Members of the public, if you have a question or comment about the subjects on the agenda, please raise your hand and wait to be recognized. Angel, if you take, I think it's roll now, right? Yep. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Members, when I call your name, please answer present. Jose Morano.
Present.
Bria.
Present.
Jewel Jones.
Present.
Sage Mason.
Present.
Jessica Morris.
Present.
Valerie Ponte.
Present.
Asher Rodriguez.
Asher said he'd be about 30 minutes late.
Yeah.
All right. With that said, adoption of the agenda. If I don't see any objections, we will adopt the agenda for this evening's meeting. Seeing no objections, then this meeting's agenda has been adopted. I believe the committee minutes, the meeting minutes I owed, Angel, were just for last month, right? And I did them, so that would be September. All right, so if I don't see any objection to the September meeting minutes, they will be approved. Okay, seeing no objection, then the September minutes have been approved. All right, with that said, then we will see the announcements, informational updates. I don't think we have any. All right, so we're just going to move into the presentations and discussions. It's essentially a continuing discussion on the proposed bylaw amendments. And you'll see at Sage, with me and Angel, but mostly Sage, went through the each article. We're going to kind of break it down and go through them. Before we do, I'd like to go around the table because I believe everybody did receive a copy of this revision on Friday. I want to go around the table and see if everybody's had a chance to read it and just give me, if you have read it, just some of your thoughts. We don't have to get into too much detail, and then we could start moving. So I guess we'll work this way. So Jewel and then Derek and so on. Then we'll go to anyone who's online.
I think I'll hold up my thoughts in here.
Good. Derek?
I want to thank Sage for an incredible amount of work put into not only his main idea here around the board oversight committee, but also just like the general going through and cleaning things up and all of that stuff. I think there's a ton of great stuff in here that if we execute it well, I think we really push the board in a good direction.
Thank you. Thank you. Melissa?
Thank you, Sage, for sending this to me. Unfortunately, this weekend has been really crazy for me, so I didn't have a chance to review it, but I want to thank you for your work.
Thank you, Nelson. Sage, I don't know if you want to share.
I read it. A lot sort of went into it. I think it basically just puts in writing some of the ideas we discussed last time. I'm curious kind of what people have to say. And then I did some cleanup stuff in the definitions, and then there were a couple places where we were referencing things that I think had changed like in the last revision. So I just cleaned that stuff up as well.
Okay, thank you. Jessica?
I'm in the same boat as Nelsa. I didn't do my homework.
Okay, no problem with that.
But do have an addition based on some things that have come up in procedure, if that is something that can be considered.
Yeah, just to make note, is there a specific article that would be in, just so we know when we get to that?
Yes, I believe it's Article 3.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Let me just see, Article 3.
It's like A, I think.
Article 3A2.
Okay.
And in both articles, it's the same issue. Inserting the word full before the the statement of a term in both cases, so Article 3A2 and Article 3B1, suggesting that it read in accordance with how the Bylaws Committee had interpreted this when it was doing its work earlier this year. Read, each officer shall serve for a full 2-year term beginning on January 1st, following the election of officers and terminating on December 31st of the second following year. And then Article 3B1 should read, no member shall serve more than 2 full consecutive terms in any one officer role for which such member was elected.
2 full terms, okay. We'll get back to that, but I also, on this, just while we're on the topic, for 3A2, so shall, I believe, I was told, from city law was clarified to be, mean must, so it is a requirement. But I do believe that word may still have some confusion, and there has maybe been advice to change that to must, or to just go in the definition section and add shall, because I think it's used in multiple places where it means that, and just maybe then in definitions clarifying that shall is actually means something must be done. So we could figure that out, but I just wanted to raise attention to that. Okay, Angel, anybody online?
Jose, Val, and Xavier.
All right, so we'll go in that order. Jose, I don't know if you heard the question, just let us know if you've had a chance to read it and what your thoughts are, and then after that, we'll go to Valerie, and then we'll go to Xavier.
Hi, everyone. Unfortunately, the edits are a lot more extensive than I was.
We can't hear you. Jose? Let me just,
Like it when we can't hear.
yeah. All right, you know what? Let's go to Valerie, and we'll come back to Jose. Valerie,
I'm
you
sorry.
like to share?
Do you hear me now?
Hello?
We didn't, so you're gonna have to go from the beginning.
Oh,
Good.
sorry. I just didn't. Actually, Valerie,
Hold on.
Valerie, go ahead. I'll go after you. Apologies.
No, I was just gonna say that, it's a lot. I read it. It's gone beyond what we were as a group established to do. A lot more. I don't know how we could ever go over all of this in a good amount of time and 2 hours, meeting once a month. But, it's a lot.
Okay, I don't know if you're breaking up or you, okay, we heard you. Jose.
I also agree with Valerie. Unfortunately, it was too much for me to be able to finish in the time that we had. I require a little more time to go through it more thoroughly.
All right, thank you. Xavier?
Evening, everyone. I'm called away for an urgent work meeting, and I've been up since 5 a.m. So I'll try to make my observations as succinct as possible. I did get to cover it. I would say thank you to the committee, thank you, Sage, thank you, everyone. There's a lot of cleanup work that's necessary. I think having listened to last month's meeting, and the conversations had, is that this seemed much more of a substantive change than previously pitched to the committee. And again, as I indicated, when the bylaws committee was established, it was with the clear remit. But I've never been one, as you've all known, to be opposed to new ideas and exploring ways to make this more efficient. In covering it, it does seem that it tends to pull not just, the pitch was that it would lighten the load for executive, but on its appearances, it seems like 2/3 of
Is this our issue?
I don't know. That's what I'm wondering, because it is happening, but with each of them, but I don't know what they're.
Hey, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right,
You
I
were
feel
at
like I'm gonna.
2/3 of executive.
Okay, yeah, so on its face, and again, this is just looking at, when we discuss things, just like when we deal with a resolution or a letter of support, and we want to put in a copious amounts of detail, and we may discuss, and in the process of drafting, we may come up with ideas, individually or as a group. And I think looking at this, it seemed much more expansive. And again, I think the committee should have a robust conversation and a proper markup if they're going to consider it going forward. I think just like we wait once we see something in writing, whether it's a resolution or whatnot, I urge this committee to do the same. And it seems like that's what's being echoed in the room. But I think going through them, and examining it, taking a pause, saying, okay, is this something we want to consider? And then you send that across to me. I think running this up the flagpole for the general counsel, maybe city law, now that city law is being extensively more responsive since we're not having legislation presented right now, we may be able to get a quicker advisement. I do want to also echo. So, I mean, this is, again, I appreciate the work. I think, it's expansive. And I would like to take under consideration how impactful it could be with our board governance. I do think that one comment I will say is that, most, if not all community boards, the chair always still choose who the chair of the committee should be. And I will use a case in point. If something like this were to pass, I would almost want to defer to someone like Nilsa, who has the expansive institutional knowledge to be able to helm something like this versus someone who may have only been on the board a year or two before getting elected into vice chair, for example. And that's okay that you get elected. But I think that responsibility vested with the chair, I think, is something that should stand the test of time. But as an observation, but nonetheless, I applaud the work and actually diving and exploring this. But I think, that's what I would like to leave it with, is for you guys to have a conversation and send whatever you have marked up or whatnot, and I'll run it up the flagpole. But just like we do with letters and resos, we always sit on it a month or so, even more, to make sure we get it right. And the last thing I'll say is that the house is not on fire. We're still functioning and functioning well, and we'll continue to do so. So let's, if we're going to pursue this, let's do it the right way. And that's calm and measured and detailed. So thank you, everyone.
All right.
I'm gonna
thank
have
you
to
for
jump
that.
off, Adem. Sorry, I got to check in, go to this work dinner now. I apologize, everyone.
Oh,
Appreciate you all.
Have a good night.
You too.
Thank you.
Can I say something?
Of course.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone, and really, thanks for everyone's work on this. I tend to agree with what Xavier said and others have said in terms of just more thoughtful consideration before we rush into anything. So that's my thought about that.
Okay. Sage.
I'll say I am fine with more thoughtful consideration. I do think it's important that everybody reviews this in depth. I'm also, I kind of agree with what Xavier said about like having somebody who has some experience kind of be at the helm of this. I think that's a little harder to put into, I don't think the chair should appoint the chair of the board oversight committee, because part of the purpose of the board oversight committee is to make sure the chair does what they're supposed to do. So it's kind of hard to articulate on paper like what that process should look like. I tried to kind of rely on like an almost like ebb and flow, where the vice chair who would chair this, which is an idea that came up last meeting, would like nominate people for the other seats on the board oversight committee. And then of maybe 3 nominations, the chair would pick 2 of those people, and those would be like the other people on this committee. And that those nominations would be based off of like what is needed on this committee. So maybe somebody with like a lot of experience on the board, maybe somebody with experience being like a parliamentarian or with like conflict resolution, just because I think all of those things are necessary. But part of the purpose of the board oversight committee is to not be directly under the influence of the chair of the board. And so I think having the chair just pick especially who the chairperson of the board oversight committee is, kind of defeats the purpose. But I do think it's important to kind of discuss that, and I'm curious what people think. And then the second point on like the extensiveness of these changes, again, I want everyone to have time to like digest this, and I don't want to necessarily rush into it. But I will say the changes that have been made are not substantially different from what we discussed last meeting. And like all of the materials were provided last meeting as well. I think it looks like a lot because there's just like a lot of things that like you replace one word with another on paper. But there isn't, except for some cleanup things, like I added definitions. Almost everything here was already here. Yeah.
Okay, I'll go Jessica, Derek, then I'm gonna make a comment, all right? So go ahead.
As a matter of process and supporting the effort here, I think in pictures and understanding the sort of balance of power relative to responsibilities and duties among the sort of named positions within the body. Because there's, another 35 people who are not named here, but who are all kind of part of this organization. I would like to make a diagram and offer that as part of how we begin to understand, because sometimes there's crossover that words on a page don't show us that can be articulated much more clearly in a picture that will ultimately, potentially be useful in explaining why this is a good thing and what it actually does to how we all work together collectively. So I will do that if there's no objections.
Are you gonna do it now?
I can try.
I'm kind of curious what that would look like.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, do if you want, but I didn't know you were doing now.
No,
You know, I'd like you to be engaged, but yeah. You can always do it later. I mean, if you want to do something, okay, great. Derek?
I had a question for Sage.
Mhm.
So my understanding reading through this is that this board oversight committee would take on many of the responsibilities that the executive committee previously was doing. So like in your mind, like what is the executive committee doing now that some of that is being taken by the board oversight? What's your vision on that?
Sure. Well, I think Angel put this pretty aptly the other day, where the board oversight committee would be doing procedural stuff, and the executive committee would be doing like the artsy work of the board. Like organizations want to talk to us about what they have going on. Each person on executive is the chair of their committee, and the meetings of executive committee would just mostly be cross-committee collaboration, seeing how can we work together for the betterment of the community. That's like the public-facing role. And then the board oversight committee just makes sure everybody is doing what they're supposed to be doing, and everybody kind of knows what's going on. I think that's the best way I can put it.
Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna say a few things. I think and I'm gonna say it a little, I've been saying myself, right, that we talk a lot about how to be a board and what's going on than actually sometimes just being a board, right? So I agree in the sense that the board oversight would be in a lot of ways focusing on how the board operates, that discussion of like, what's the board? Why is this happening? And it would allow us to just focus on the work of the community at executive, right?
I like that.
Yeah, and again, right, the cross-committee collaboration, there's a lot, I think there's some hot button issues in this community, and they touch on a bunch of committees. And, there could be some things that the executives we're gonna kind of take the initiative on those things, the same way other committees take, initiative on things that fall under their purview. Another comment, two more. I agree with Sage that in a lot of ways that this looks so overwhelming. I think a lot of the changes are cleanup in language. I do think there are certain parts that we're gonna probably wanna have more of a discussion on. one of my concerns is, and I'm all for the chair. I don't know if the word's having less power, but I feel like a lot of times this board defers to the chair. Other members don't feel as engaged, and it's good to find ways to do that. I guess my concern about is the makeup of this committee as proposed. And I will say, because, and my main concern is not the vice chair, the treasurer, secretary, it's that even the two members that the chair would be appointing, the way it's being phrased, to be honest, they're not being appointed by the chair. They're being appointed by the vice chair. Because if I give you three people and I tell you got to pick two of them, I'm picking. You're not picking. So that is my concern. Again, I don't know that it has to be the chair who picks them. There might be another way. I'm just throwing that out there. So, I mean, I guess what I want to do is, like, there's a lot of this that I feel like we can all read, and I don't think that you're going to come back, any of us, and be like, oh my God, we got to have a real long conversation about that. But there might be portions of this that are worth discussing tonight, so that we do kind of have a better idea of like what we're going to review and just getting some preliminary opinions. I guess if you're okay with it, everybody, Jessica, I think we could possibly just put your two things in maybe and kind of, those are cleanup of things that I feel like we should have done, right? It was related to the elections, and, granted, we don't have an election now for a couple of years, but there's no harm in kind of finishing the job that I feel like maybe we were originally tasked with. So I'm going to go to Nilsa, and then Jessica, if you don't mind, I think I understood what you're saying, but Angel, I'm going to ask you, because when Jessica says the language, if you don't mind jotting it down for me on those two sections. So I'll go Nilsa, and then Jessica, if you could do that. And then we could take a vote on that once we have the language. And then once we do that, then we'll move into, I don't know, Sage, if maybe you take the lead on it. I think you have a good idea maybe of where there might be more deliberation than other portions. And so then we'll just kind of go through some things. I mean, it's 6:50. I'd like to try to get us out of here by 8, but if we're really in it, we can go 8:30, no more than 2 hours, all right? That's the preference. So Nilsa and then Jessica, okay?
Okay, I just need some clarification, not about what's written, but just in the general things in terms of the different boards on the, let's say, I'll use just Manhattan, because everybody, there's the different, borough presidents, and they will have it different, forget them. So it's my understanding, and I could be wrong, and Angel, please, if I'm wrong, just correct me, just please. There's always been that expectation that the chair would be the leader of the board, so to speak. Now, I don't know if other boards, I had studied their bylaws a long time ago, have like that, the co-chair idea that at one point, co-committees and stuff like that. But if the idea among all the boards, but especially let's say the 12, nothing says that we can't change like we're doing. But if the focus is that the board has to have a focal point where it's, let's say, the chair, and that's why in the bylaws it says the chair shall do this and the chair shall do that. If we give this, like, what I don't want is confusion, right? Like, where people are confused that all of a sudden, where the chair states a position that it seems like the chair, he or she, have to jump through hoops to get something done that ordinarily wouldn't have taken that much effort in the old iteration. So I don't know how this works, like I think in the office oversight can definitely absorb some stuff. I think that executive should not be watered down in any way. So that would be like a discussion as to what executive thinks its new function would be, and I think executive needs to give information, right, to help round out what you've written in terms of what executive, the chairs and the chairs and the elected people look, but my question, I guess, is in all the bylaws, I believe the chair is the point person. So if you're going to, if ultimately the chair is the one that's responsible for leading the board, I think we need to just make sure that whatever we do doesn't make it more difficult for the board to carry on its work. And that's not what I'm saying is here. I'm not saying it clear. You know, like, so for instance, if I had an issue, I was very collaborative. So I was collaborative with my vice chair and my, you know, and my chairs of my committee. Sometimes my chairs felt that I needed to be more hands-on because I would give them more responsibility so that they could. So that's the only thing, that the clarity of what the chair's expectations are, because like Adam brought up a good point, if, you know, if the vice chair, because technically the vice chair is not in charge of the board. It's the chair, and the chair is elected by the body. So is the vice chair, but that's the person that, you know, when agencies write here and stuff like that, they want to address it to like that person. So that's the only thing I'm saying. But like in my mind, I have to have clarity because I've been putting in 12-hour days and I'm a little bit, you know, so I need to just read a little bit more.
I did want to add on to what else you were saying is, I think that a challenge is, given that there's an election coming up, and I think if this was already in place and people knew, oh, the vice chair I'm voting for is gonna have this set of responsibilities and I'm gonna make my vote based on knowing that's the responsibilities they have, that feels one type of way versus someone gets elected and then 2 months from now or more, now that person is like, has those responsibilities, and it's like, well, maybe we would have made a different choice if we knew that's what they were going to be doing. But that I do think is a way where if it was in place and then that was the consideration during the election process, I could see feeling more comfortable knowing, oh, well, the body picked this person, knowing this was going to be their set of responsibilities to sort of do this thing. And I do think, as was described, that this is like, you know, like the boring stuff, right, of the keeping the board moving, whereas like the front end stuff of like collaborating with committees and like bringing in partners and doing that work, like it just seems like there's not the time to do that at executive when, you know, and not that I've been on it for very long, but, you know, a liquor license thing comes in and there's yelling for an hour, there's, you know, going through the attendance stuff, like it seems like a lot of time is taken up by stuff that isn't moving the board forward. And that's what I do like about this. But the point about like who we're choosing to do it, if I think it's great that it's elected by the full board versus appointed by the chair, but then people kind of have to know that before this election, you know?
And then just one more thing that I've been thinking about, it's not here or there, but because what you just said reminded me, is that so board oversight, right, will have its distinct responsibilities. But who does board oversight answer to? And what I mean by that is, let's say that we do the attendance stuff, God help us all, and we do it, and now we have these recommendations. Does then the board oversight present it to executive? Because executive is the body of the chair and the officers, so that then they also vote on, you know, on the recommendations, but they don't do the initial vetting where, let's say, board oversight does it, but.
Yeah, they save them the time of the work, but then it still goes to executive to
Okay.
make it. I just want to say one thing, I want to go, Jewel, no, I'll go Sage, Jewel. I just want to touch on what you said there. and I agree with what you're saying, but then, and the challenge in my head is, if we feel that way about something, we have to figure out maybe a way around that, right? Because in my opinion, a bylaw that would be correct or not correct, a bylaw should be, when we put them in, they should be lasting, right? So we shouldn't be worried about who would win an election, because you may be comfortable, and then 2 years from now, we don't want to have to change them again just because, so I think that's just something to keep in mind, that a bylaw should be able to not be so impacted by who may or may not win an election. But so I'm not saying I don't understand how you're feeling, I'm just making that point. All right, Sage, Jewel, Jessica, and then maybe we'll go back to Jessica, or we'll just stay with Jessica to do the other part, and then we could come back to this.
Yeah, so about as I envision it, executive and the chair would still be like the face of everything. The board oversight committee is just like a hand that's like almost like an umpire. Like this is these are the rules. Like follow the rules, chair. With regard to the attendance thing, I don't think it would go to executive. Board oversight would decide the attendance issue, and then it would go to full board. And full board would, unless full board couldn't meet or something.
In a 5-minute report, correct?
Yes.
It's in there. Yeah,
Yeah.
very good.
And so this would also avoid the issue of executive, in my view, kind of being like a, God bless everybody on executive, all the committee chairs, but kind of like people are.
You're yourself included now.
Sure. But it's kind of like, a lot of it feels like it's sort of like relationships.
Oh, I have a question to that, because I disagree. That is not a procedure that works, or has not really worked. I guess my question is, why would you feel it would be, because my personal opinion, I might be wrong, is it's just difficult to vote your fellow board members off. What guarantee do we have that the people on board oversight are gonna operate differently when they see somebody they know across from the table?
Well, okay, yeah.
I'd love whoever could answer,
Yeah, I mean, I just think, so in starting the, to draw a picture of it, what it does is provide a little bit of a buffer. It doesn't negate or change the fact that there are always, relationships between board members that stand. But when you have a specific task of, and part of the distinction, I think that we're starting to make, Nilsa, this is to your point, of the role of the chair being kind of a singular entity. With a lot of things, there's kind of internal functions and operations, and then there's external functions and operations. And I think that's kind of where the sort of distinction and separation is kind of happening, that executive starts to take on that role of operating with the external facing kind of community building kind of issues that are coming up through that pipeline. And then board oversight is in its sort of dual function then, with a little bit of a buffer, right, being separate from those kind of heart-driven issues that bring all of us to the table, operates to kind of keep the internal operations in a sort of functional checks and balances, equilibrium, do justice, sort of mode. Is that?
Yeah.
I probably confused everybody, but sorry. I think there's a little bit of a buffer. Is kind of what I'm understanding.
I think that's one good piece of it. I also think once the board oversight committee is constituted, it can write up a procedure that maybe has more deference to sending things externally, if it's an attendance thing, to maybe in the internal operating procedures of board oversight, you just form a rule that's attendance stuff. If you've hit 4 absences, we send it to, unless it's a medical thing, we send it to
oath?
Yeah, oath. And then we
Like the city, they have like the Oath downtown, they have like tribunals, where,
Tribunals are fine.
Well, I think that's what they call it.
Office of Administrative Trials and Hearings.
Okay.
Oath,
They,
which is further internal.
but essentially it would just be like a third party, that has no real skin in the game, right? Which, yeah, no, I mean, okay.
Would it go?
They'd make they couldn't remove anyone, but it would be a lot easier to just take their recommendation and take a vote on it, in my opinion, than, doing it the way. Look, essentially, the best way this could be is if the people that appointed them, looked at this and removed them, right? Whether it's the city council, I mean, we all know that, we didn't put them on, so why are we voting people off? But unfortunately, that's the system we have. I think there are ways to improve it. I'm open to anything other than what we've been doing, because what we've been doing does not work. And I do agree with you when you say a buffer, and maybe there could be, something more rigid, and also just it's time consuming, and it does take from the work. I'm gonna go Jewel. I know you had your hand up. Yes, I'm sorry. And then we'll see. Do we have any hands up there? Okay, so Jewel, go ahead.
So I'm just going back to what Melissa said earlier, and I was following what you were saying in terms of like, this is like a large, a major like procedural kind of change. And if you said you looked at other bylaws and other boards and things like that. So my concern is that, what was the result of all that? And in terms of, instituting this, what do you call this thing?
Board oversight.
So, and I'm not saying that just like to be funny, but, so, because it's a big thing, and if the other boards, if this exists somewhere else, okay, fine. And then in terms of what you were saying about the, who do they, ultimately, have to speak to? So I'm going back to, hopefully I got what you were saying in terms of, well, I'm gonna say this. In terms of standing committees, the chair is the one who appoints folks for standing committees. Is this gonna be considered a standing committee?
Yeah.
Well, then, then that's a problem, because if you're saying that, that the chair won't appoint, and there's like these vice chair, or whoever you're talking about is going to be like the person, then it's not a standing committee, or there's some change has to be made or something, or some difference has to happen.
Can you clarify, why does that make it not a standing committee?
Oh, so if you're saying it is a standing committee, and typically of standing committees, it's the chair that appoints folks, why is this the exception? And how will you clarify, or how will you explain the exception here?
Well, I think the chair appoints the chairs of every committee, regardless of whether it's a standing committee or a special committee.
Okay.
And I think the exception here is just that this committee is different from the other committees,
Okay.
because it deals with the rules and the internal operations of the board. There's nothing that says that the chair has to appoint the chair of every committee. There was an idea that was floated that we haven't really done much with, and I don't see too much reason to do it, but we talked about maybe having elected committee chairs a couple months ago. So this is essentially one elected committee chair who is also the vice chair of the board. And I see it as, right now, the vice chair doesn't really have too much of a responsibility. Some chairs are like more collaborative with their vice chairs and will kind of like work with them. I think we have seen there be sort of the possibility of there being like tension between the chair and the vice chair. And I think this kind of gives the vice chair a responsibility.
I have a response to that.
And I also think this serves like the goal of, right now, in my view, there's frequently like debate as to like, what do we do here? Or people feel like there's like too heavy of a hand coming from the chair sometimes. And this just allows a body to, in addition to some of its other responsibilities, be the body that is like, this is how we do things and here's a record of it. And go ahead. Yeah.
So, to me, the chair is the chair, and that's the person that we're all supposed to be reporting to. I know, and then when you guys talk about, I'm gonna kind of say, when we talk about attendance, I'm one of the folks, I like all of you, but I'm going by what the bylaws say in terms of, you miss certain meetings, you might be my friend, but I'm one of those hard stance per people. I have no problem with that, but that's an aside. But getting back to in terms of, to me, the chair is the chair. And I'm gonna be very honest, open and transparent. Are you running for vice chair?
I am.
Okay, so to me, let's keep that in the back of our minds. If you say, like, the vice chair, like, really has not a lot, any role or much of a role, this will have a lot, they will have a big role, and you are running for vice chair. I just want to just put that out there. You can respond or not respond, but that's a factor as well.
So I don't know if I'm gonna win my election.
I understand, I'm just,
Yeah.
Jill, to that point.
Yeah, go ahead.
And Derek, this goes back to your, there's a great way to get started with something when you don't know if it's gonna go well, but you wanna try it. And that can be difficult to do, I imagine, with something like implementing a big change to bylaws. But, I imagine there's some sort of way to sort of blanket a pilot, right, where you implement this for a period of time. And you say, after a period of 18 months, it will be assessed whether, it's a clause in accepting the changes related to the operational changes that you say, we want to try it. We don't quite know what it's going to be like, but if we try it for a period of time during a term that can then be affirmed as, yeah, this is working in the way that it was designed to work, then that gives you a little bit of an opportunity to revert if it doesn't go as well as it should. It's like training wheels in the process. I don't know, that's something that city law would probably have to think on and digest, and it's like a disclaimer or a procedural kind of sort of term to implement the change that would allow something like our very prescriptive operational entity to try something out in good faith before it becomes the way things go.
I think, the sentiment, or maybe my feelings are, I'm not like, the Board Oversight Committee, like, in the sense that it alleviates a lot of the workload for executive, does make sense to me, right? I agree. You haven't been there much, but you're hitting the nail on the head as you are, that, there's better ways we could be spending our time. But I think the concern is that the final decision doesn't go through executive, right? Now, there may be situations where the board oversight may take on something that would impact the chair, right? Theoretically, I think it was mentioned that there could be a evaluation on if a chair, I don't know, like any other member could have an issue, whatever. But, that could still go through executive. Obviously, the chair wouldn't be able to take a position on their own, whatever. These are things, ways of looking at it. I think it's unavoidable to say that you're going to assign any members, that the chair isn't going to have this kind of looming presence over everybody, right? But I think from my experience, I haven't really seen where people don't just vote how they want and defer to it. I just think that for me, or from what I'm hearing, because honestly, I don't have strong feelings about this, is that it makes sense to me in the sense of doing the legwork and alleviating executive, but that maybe all those decisions coming from the committee and still not going through the executive committee is a concern, right? Like, I think Nilsa, you said, like, they could send these recommendations to executive after they do the work. Or maybe that's not what you said, or like, not saying you approve that, but that was kind of like the gist, I thought, of what you were saying.
So I just have a few things to say, and, this is not my committee, and so I don't wanna take up the time of legitimate, committee members. But I'm just going through things in my mind, right? Like, I've been part of this board for 11, going on 12 years, and the bylaws never seem to be poorly written. And so when I see extensive rewrites, when I'm not sure that was the remit of this committee when it was first joined, is a little concerning to me. For the simple reason that I'm the type of chair of a committee that I follow whatever I was mandated to do, right? So I always applaud forward thinking, but I'm actually trying to remember what is the remit of this iteration of the bylaws. And it seemed to me that it was regarding the elections. Now, it seemed like, and I did these, ran through these for like 12 years. And so it seems to me, and it's just my opinion only, that it's great to, what's been discussed here for board oversight was something that I had discussed with Angel, other than the attendance issues. The trying to assist board members, the working more as an HR department with the staff who doesn't have it. And so my concern is that, first of all, in my opinion, this body is not the type of body to do things on a pilot basis. We either have to know what we're doing or we're not, because we are representing the community. When we got appointed by whatever body appointed us, they're expecting us to work, right? And so knowing an idea that may work or may not work or may seem more democratic, if a lot of these issues, if we're thinking about these issues because there may have been personality conflicts, right? And we want to be more giving, we need to think about whether the changes we're doing or considering, is that really going to help the operation of this board? Because every year you get new people. So my question is, other than the board oversight recommendations, why else? Why else are we looking at the chair responsibilities? There has to be a go-to person, because ultimately when there's a legal problem in this office, the chair is the body that goes downtown and is the face with the district manager and everything like that. There can be no watering down in certain instances. So all I'm saying is we need to be real clear that whatever is changed, that it doesn't change the functioning of the board, because ultimately the city's gonna look at that one person who's the head, right? They're not gonna look at, well, CB11 is always on the forefront of things and they're trying a new model, and isn't this great that now the vice chair has this responsibility and then executive has this responsibility. Whatever changes come here, first of all, look at your remit. What was it that you were sent to do? Make sure that gets done, right? Because that has to get done, because that's why you were put together. And then if there are other recommendations, like the expansion of oversight with specific duties for executive, then I can see this body doing that, so that then the board can approve this. Because don't forget, this is not just a brain trust of whoever's here with any ideas that you have. The board has to approve it, and what I think is good may not be good for the other 20 people that may say, well, I see what she's saying, but we don't agree with that. And so, my caution is that everything that's thought about changing gets thought about 2 and 3 times, because when I look at the bylaws, other with misspelling and changing some words here and there, maybe tightening up that and maybe tightening up what you would think board oversight should be, just the roles, just be cautious in how you water down the roles, because ultimately one of those roles may have to answer for something, and you want to be able that role has that power behind it, and I use the word power loosely.
Okay, before, I'm gonna recognize other hands. We'll go Sage, Jessica, and then I would like to just, because on the spirit of what we were, I believe, mandated to do, which was predominantly elections, attendance, which has been a challenge. You know, I think we get the things that were mandated, like we can clean some of this up, on the election stuff tonight.
I would say I was mandated to do oversight.
By who?
When I advocated for this committee to exist over a year ago, and then when you gave me the assignment to do.
Well, I mean, the mandate from the board chair.
Yeah.
So Xavier mandated it?
I mean, I don't want to put words in Xavier's mouth. But I've advocated for this committee to exist, starting from.
No, this committee exists, the difference is that you're adding the word board to it, and you're adding some duties.
Well, no, I guess my thing
There
is,
is an
you can't
oversight
mandate
committee.
something as a member of a committee. It would have to be mandated from a higher up.
Yeah, when I was appointed to this committee, my understanding was that it was to remedy an issue that I had brought up about a year ago with regard to the executive committee doing something that I thought was contrary to what the full board wanted.
Well, I'm not gonna say, because that would definitely be something that would have to be between you and the board chair, so they would have to provide clarity. Just my position was, I could not have mandated it because it was your idea, but no, and I'm not opposed to I'm not opposed to this committee, staying together and exploring all of these ideas. When I say mandate, there was time-sensitive things, the question is, why was the bylaws committee convened at that time? It seemed like it was for election stuff. We kind of did that, so, and then, we weren't disbanded, so, then it's, all right, well, what else can we do? So, yeah, I mean, again, I'm not saying that this isn't stuff that should be considered or everything. I'm just saying that when I was asked to chair this committee, I was not told by the chair of the board that this was the mandate. That's all the point I'm trying to make. So, all right, Sage. Oh, Angel's got his hand up. Well, all right, still, Sage, you were recognized first. And then if you want to forego to Angel, then we'll circle back to Jessica. And then Jessica, after you talk, let's go to these couple points and we could continue talking after that.
Yeah, I just want to say I disagree that this mandate was solely about elections. I think that was an important thing that we decided was time sensitive.
Well, I didn't say it was only about elections. I just said I wasn't mandated on a board oversight committee.
Okay. Yeah, I think it was a culmination of factors and like tensions that were arising and people were like, what's going on right now? That I think gave rise to this committee. And I think there are many ways to try and address those. When we first started, I didn't even think the elections thing was that. I didn't think that was really that big of an issue. But we acted on it and, it is what it is. I thought the the bylaws committee's purpose was just to look at the bylaws and come up with ways to make them better, because it seemed like the board was not functioning super well. And I think, in my view, the chair, again, not to put words in his mouth, but just was like, I'm feeling pressure right now, and maybe this is something that a committee constituted of these folks should look at and find ways to improve the functioning of the board to avoid issues like this. That being said, I kind of want to reframe what has seemed like the prevailing discussion about this. I don't see this as taking power away from executive or from the chair. The chair is still the chair. It's like the president is the president, but this also provides a Supreme Court almost, or a judiciary branch, just to say hey, we need to follow the rules, by the way. And this is what the rules are. I see the Board Oversight Committee as helping the chair do as good a job as the chair can do based off of what the rules are that the full board has agreed to. That's one thing. And then any decision that the Board Oversight Committee would make would also have to be ratified by the full board, even if it doesn't go to executive committee. And I think that is a fine, fair way to do it. And that's almost what every other committee already does. You make a motion, or you move, and it'll maybe be discussed in executive, if executive meets before the full board. But it'll automatically be put on the agenda and the full board will vote on it when the full board meets. I don't see a reason, if the board oversight committee is now doing like attendance and disciplinary and conflict resolution, boring internal stuff, that executive would have to, be involved in it. And I think that almost does executive a service, not only because they don't have to spend time doing that stuff that is not really much to do with the community, but because they also can say, like say somebody's feelings are hurt, you can say, oh, that was the board oversight committee that was responsible for that. I'm sorry, it's not our problem. Though, lots of empathy and let's work to resolve it so it's not an issue maybe on the committee. But I see the board oversight committee as like serving a crucial purpose. And that is to, one, like give everybody guidance on like how things should be happening, to enforce the rules, and also to empower every board member. And there will be increasing numbers of new board members now that people are term limited, to have more reliance on like what the rules are and not just what people say the rules should be or the way we've done things before, but rather like somebody who shows up and is trying to figure stuff out. One, you have like the member development portion of what the board oversight committee does, where now members are going to know like these are the rules, this is what I can do as a community board member, and I don't have to wait 6 years to learn what's going on, because then they'd only have 2 years left. And also I can rely on these rules to know what rights I have on this board and how I can most effectively contribute to the community. So I think this is empowering everybody, and as a result, it will empower the board. The chair is still the chair completely. Just they have less crappy stuff to do, I think, as a result of this. I also think it would be great if like the executive committee did some of like the almost like training functions of new board members. But I also understand that they all have their own committees, and that's something that maybe can be done in committee, not necessarily something that they need to be doing during the executive committee meetings. And then to sort of like touch on the fact that I'm running for vice chair, I don't have to be running for vice chair. I don't even, like I think I would be good at this job. But it's mostly because I want like this to have some weight behind it. And if somebody else would win becoming vice chair, I would want them to do this job and to take it seriously. And so if they don't do it, people can be like, well, like what happened with that? We had all of this hope that this institution would form that would empower people. And now we're kind of, back where we were, where people are wondering like what's going on all the time. So part of the reason I think it would be even better if like somebody else who was good at all of this stuff was running for vice chair, so I wouldn't have to do it because I'm busy. And this is going to take like a lot of time if I was to win that election. But I just think it's important that like this is taken seriously, and I think it's an important job that somebody do. And if somebody else becomes vice chair, I hope they do this, and I hope they do it well. So that's that.
Angel?
Yeah, the state said most of what I wanted to say, so thanks for saving me time. I don't see the controversy here with this proposal, frankly. A number of the things that are being volunteered for this committee to take on, in addition to, of course, absorbing the office oversight stuff, is stuff that the executive committee doesn't do, and they don't want to do it. And when they do it poorly. Those are facts. So if there's another committee that can be constituted and tasked with these procedural things, process things, and be focused on that, and, hopefully, like any committee, do a good job at it, then I think that's all to the better. The idea that members would have somewhere to go when there is tension between members, when there is tension between staffers, when there is tension between staffers and board members. I think that's important. I've said here before, and, I don't know how much it lands with board members because board members are not at risk. It's very risky to work for a community board as a staff person. And I'm always going to encourage the community board, and frankly, every other community board that I talk to, because I participate in this citywide effort amongst community boards, to be as professional as possible, to volunteer to be as professional as possible, because the people that work for these boards are professionals who are, whose livelihoods depend on this work, who are very dedicated to this work. And unfortunately, the reality of working for a community board is that you're at risk from volunteers and whim. That's a fact. That's not an insult, it's a fact. I've heard many nightmare stories at this board and many nightmare stories at boards across the city. So to the extent that we can try to professionalize and try to institute practices that protect our staff and frankly protect our members. I've been around long enough to know that it isn't just staff that catches the arrows. Members catch the arrows too. And I've seen many members leave after they caught an arrow and nobody fixed anything or addressed what it was that they were dealing with or presented with. And then besides that kind of saucy kind of stuff, there's work that executive does not want to do. I've been here for a very long time, and I've supported the executive committee for a very long time, and through many different iterations, different groupings. So it isn't this particular group, so don't go to your best friend and say, Angel talked bad about you. It's a number of different groups over the years. They don't want to do it. And while I understand they're not wanting to do things to their friends, et cetera, I do understand that. There are responsibilities to the institution that someone or someone's have to be willing, no matter how uncomfortable, to address in the service of the body, right? So it isn't that, I'm gonna pick a name that's on this board, Jill. It isn't that anybody has an issue with Jill. It's that Jill did something that's problematic and it has to be addressed. And, nothing should be off the table in how that's dealt with within, professional parameters. But instead, what we have time and again is, well, I live next door to Jill. Jill's son is on, the same softball team, as my husband. And then it doesn't happen. And this isn't to jump all over Jill, but what happens is then you don't have quorum. Then you don't have whatever it is that Jill's doing incorrect. She's yelling at meetings or whatever. Is being disrespectful, disruptive, and those things need to be, those things and other things, whatever it is, need a place where they can be addressed towards finding a remedy so that hopefully Jill can continue to participate in a constructive way and that Jill's fellow members can also feel comfortable participating, as opposed to, no disrespect, it's a bit of the Wild West. So if your feelings get hurt and you want to go somewhere and you're not in with the cool kids, you're gonna have to deal with it or leave. And I've seen that happen a lot of times, and it's kind of sad because you guys don't work here, you're volunteers. So nothing can be held over your head, right? It depends on you, how committed are you to treating your fellow board members in a respectful and considerate, way, et cetera. And if for whatever reason y'all aren't, then that member that's caught the affront is out of luck. And like we've seen that happen many times where the group is okay with a member being disrespected out loud in front of people. That member should have somewhere to be able to go, for example, this board oversight committee, and say, in confidence, this is what's going on. And, you know, I need to air my concern and, you know, hopefully we can find some mediation or some way to resolve this or address this. Where that isn't really happening consistently. We've also been at this table many times in our executive sessions for like removals. The board doesn't want to do removals, even in the cases that are the most egregious. The way that I hear this proposal is, this is a very procedural, cold committee. It's just, you know, 2 + 2 = 4, period. I think the board needs that. There's still the vote that has to happen at full board. I forget who mentioned it. So it's not a guarantee that if oversight says remove Jill, that Jill is removed. But at least that recommendation will go forward, and they're gonna have to back that up. It's a serious thing to remove a board member. It can't just be done willy-nilly. It should most certainly be done seriously and considered seriously and through due process, et cetera. But then, you know, once it gets presented that the board is hearing that this is a seriously considered thing and weighted and weighed thing before such a recommendation comes forward, that, you know, Nelson used to chair it, you know, the board. You guys didn't want to do that. We've had this conversation. You never want to remove Jill, no matter what Jill did, right? And then you have resentment, frustration amongst Jill's fellow board members, right? So the way I'm hearing it, sorry, Sage, if I'm putting words in your mouth, but the way I'm hearing this proposal is a very procedural kind of committee, focused committee, that then leaves, I think we said the other day when we were prepping for this, like the art to the executive committee. You know, what do we, you know, what are our priorities? What do we want to focus on? How can we work together, et cetera? Which is also something that the executive committee has said many times at this table about how do we do that cross-committee collaboration. The term has been used, but the collaboration really hasn't really kicked off. Like, there's been, you know, little attempts, but really, this is not an insult. People are busy, and I understand you all are volunteers, but it is what it is, right? Like, you have to be judged at the table for the work you're doing, right? And, you know, perhaps in taking some of this, no disrespect, busy work away from executive, who frankly doesn't really want to do it, then executive could, you know, do the artsy stuff. You know, hey, what's your committee? Housing. Hey, housing, you know, you're talking to the such and such committee about, you know, this and how do we work together. Like you've been reaching out from housing to Isaac a lot on this project that crosses your committees. Then there's more time for that. You know, with this proposal as I'm seeing it now, like I think I'm 95% of the way there because it's essentially oversight, which already exists, with the bit about, okay, what do we do with members? Which executive doesn't want to do. They just don't. This is my neighbor, this kid plays with my kid in softball, you know, so they don't want to do it. So whomever, if this committee gets enacted, whoever's on that committee, I think, you know, in fairness to the rest of the body and to the responsibility they would be given should it be enacted, has to be just mathematical, you know, 2, 4. That's it. And then the board can figure out what it wants to do with that. But if it's, you know, this member missed, we've heard wild stuff. We pick somebody from ancient history. You know, Pepe Le Pew was here 10 years ago and missed 8 out of 9 meetings. Never called, came back, was for 5 minutes and left again and slammed the door on the way out. And we're like, oh, it's fine. You know, that frustrates the rest of the group. So if this body could be the body that says 2 + 2 = 4, Angel, you've been late every day. You know, Marlene, you haven't gotten the minutes in, or whatever combination, right? Like I'm not putting it all in members. It also still has the HR function for the staff, right? That, you know, those conversations are happening, you know, staff development, member development. I love that idea of the training, which many members have mentioned. And it hasn't really happened. There've been attempts, you know, I'm not gonna like say that there haven't been attempts. But if there's a body, like the promise of any effort is that if it does what it's supposed to do, then it could be a place that's always training people, especially now that we're gonna be having new members, and there's this idea of, you know, institutional knowledge, just words, we haven't figured out what that means to us. But then how do we plug new members into that institutional knowledge, whatever we land on? Is it a book? Is it a page? You know, and members, hey, this is where you go, is it a process? We need to figure that out so that we're plugging in new members as they're coming in. What I've heard so far, and I'll shut up, but I'm sorry for going on,
It's okay.
is current members freaking out that they can't stay forever. That's not the point. The point is that the body stays, right? Like, you do your work while you're here, do the best you can, record the things that you do as best you can, so that the next person you hand the baton off to has something to look at. There's gonna be 7 bazillion pages, but it's there. And if we put it in chapters, then maybe they can just go to the part in the book that, you know, applies to what it is they're considering at that moment.
Okay.
It's gotta be Jessica.
What?
It's gotta be Jessica.
Yeah, it is. So Jessica, Nilsa, I have one thing to say, and then we're going back to you, because I wanna do those 2
I can
things,
see
all
the
right?
Nielsen and then just.
I mean, no, you can go ahead.
No, so I just wanna be clear. I think the board oversight idea is a great idea. Don't get me wrong. My concern, an example. You've done all this work, right?
Listen, go.
Right, but you've done a lot of that work. And you're explaining, you're sitting here. I always have a concern when someone is given a job. So for instance, district needs and budget was gonna have all the vice chairs of the committees that were going to be part of that. And that didn't happen, right? So not to take away from whoever gets elected as vice chair, but supposing they don't have that talent, right, that you have, right? So my question is, mandating the vice chair, which we would like to give something to, right? Like mine was different. But supposing that vice chair is working with the chair in other aspects, I would like to see that someone, whoever it is from the board, that has that talent could chair, even if it's not the vice chair, right? So for instance, if someone is acting as a parliamentarian, the idea is that the person who acts as the parliamentarian maybe have parliamentarian training, right? And may have, let's say, some of them usually have a legal background. Francis was awesome, right? So those are the kind of things, like when sometimes I feel like when we look for someone to do a specific job, sometimes it doesn't come out the way it could come out if we're a little flexible. But I don't know what that means, right? Like, so I understand the idea of the vice chair doing it. If the vice chair has that fit, that's my concern. You see what I mean?
Go ahead.
So, I really, 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 really appreciate this conversation, whether it was mandated or not. I am someone who always, because of the shape of my brain, reads between the lines. And so I think this was mandated, implicit in the opportunity, embedded in the challenge that is term limits. And that came up first with how to deal with it in the course of an election. So that's what we dealt with. But by dealing with that, we were also starting to understand how this new era of community board operations might need to be considered. And it is going to be very different when, I remember George comes in and talks about the churn of affordable housing. There is going to be a churn, and that includes leadership, membership and leadership. And I think there will be more opportunity for people to leave and come back if they have positive experiences, right? That is a good thing to sort of have different opportunities at different points in your life, whether you're raising kids, whether your kids are grown, whether you're, I think there is then an opportunity to be a part of that churn in different ways where you offer different perspective, different knowledge, and you take on different roles. So I think that is the implicit mandate that nobody said we're dealing with, but that we have the opportunity, and so that if we took that opportunity through your understanding of what may have been insufficient. I'll just say that the analogy of the art side and the other side, I think you can also maybe use the sort of hard science, soft science as a way to understand, hard science is data. You missed 4 committees, that equals there's no squishy stuff. The soft science is all that kind of, it's economics, it's the human side of things. So if you're looking for a way to kind of describe the difference, that might be a good kind of set of balance. And then I'd love to be involved in the Archive Institutional Memory Project, Angel, whatever that is, and however it happens. Just as an aside.
I did not volunteer for that.
I will,
On the record.
and Nelson, to your point, how the board oversight committee functions may not be, there's this thing called a flatarchy, right, where it's not about one chair running it, that if there is a requirement for different skill sets to be working together, how that functions, maybe.
You're gonna need that.
Exactly, that so the vice chair is not then head of this entity that provides a referendum on what the chair is doing with the full board, but it is it operates differently. I don't know how, I wouldn't know how or how to describe that, but somehow a flatarchy is a good kind of, how that works, I don't know, but it is more of less of a fiefdom in the oversight committee and more of a sort of a balanced entity that understands what its responsibility is relative to supporting the entirety of the board with the kind of singular entity of chair. That's all I have, and then to go to the changes.
Okay, I'm gonna say one thing, then Derek, then we're gonna go back to Jessica. Yeah, when I say mandate, I mean, the chair gives a mandate. If I didn't think this was worthwhile, I wouldn't have let you do it. I'm not trying to waste anyone's time. As a committee chair, I can kind of decide what goes forward and doesn't. I also would have talked to you more if I didn't think this was good. What the committee would do and all the things that we said and it not being on executive are not my issue. My only issue, again, is how this committee would be comprised. My fear still, because there are other things in here, that a lot of it is, well, first of all, if we're concerned about how things go at executive, you're now taking 3 members from executive and also putting them on this: treasurer, secretary, vice chair. So that can kind of duplicate that issue there, right? You're gonna have 3 elected officers on both. My other thing is there's a cross out here in another section that says that it usually says the vice chair will do things at the direction of the chair. That got crossed out. So now I don't see anywhere in this where the chair could tell the vice chair, this is what you have to do. My fear when I see that edit and this, and I did express this to you, that I felt like this was making the vice chair, it's blurring the line to me a little bit about who is kind of really holding a lot of the power on the board. And I believe that the spirit was maybe not to have the chair have that much power, but then to turn around and kind of then put it all into another elected. I do find that kind of concerning. And I do find it concerning there was so much overlap between the committees. if we've established that maybe the people on executive or those positions aren't meant to do it. So those are my concerns. But as the committee actually taking all this on and being separate, and also the chair not having a seat there and everything, I'm okay with all of that. It's just the idea that the vice chair would be kind of running all this. And look, full disclosure, I'm all for, this is my opinion, for sharing power. You know, we talked about co-chairs and stuff like that. These are ideas that I've also had myself. I think the crossing out the line of the vice chair not doing things at the direction of the chair, I did find concerning. And I don't think that the vice chair can't do things that they think are worthwhile. But to say now that there's essentially nothing that says that the board chair could actually tell the vice chair, you know, these are things to do. I think the issue has not been a chair, I don't think the issue has been a chair telling a vice chair what initiatives they should take. I think the issue may have been a chair not giving any initiatives to the vice chair. I just think we have to look at what the problems have been rather than, you know, assuming what they've been or what they would be. All right, so Sage, you can.
I want to ask a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sage.
Yeah, go ahead.
So from what I'm hearing, it sounds like right, like what this committee would do, there's a lot of support for it. I think there's a lot of support for that and how it would benefit the board, right? Uncertainty around B, right, the composition. In your view, is the way you've described how this committee would be constituted, is it essential to the functioning of this committee? Or if we were to sort of remove it and just say it's a standing committee as constituted by the chair, that it could still be effective?
I think a separation from the chair is essential. Other than that, I don't care how other people are appointed to it, as long as those people are appointed because of like the skills that they have. It wasn't even my idea that it's chaired by the vice chair. That was, I think Angel had that idea last time. And I think it's, like, there are reasons for that, like the vice chair doesn't really have anything to do, and they're probably in the best position to like make sure the chair is following the rules, because if the chair becomes like, like Trump or something, then maybe the board is like, we need to tone this down a little bit, and the vice chair is in the best position, has the incentive to maybe do that. Yeah, so I think we all kind of agree on like what this would ideally look like. I think the specifics of like how the committee operates, I'm down for whatever people, I don't care about this like direction of the chairperson. Right now it says assist the chairperson in performing acts necessary to further the purpose of the board. I think that's fine. My fear was that like the chairperson shouldn't be able to say, hey, vice chair, like kill this thing about like me being investigated for like being a bad chair. So I didn't want like
Everything goes into.
Well, I think that I wouldn't be too concerned about that, because unlike a lot of elections, they're not running together, right? Not necessarily. A vice chair and a chair could be totally independent. I've also never seen that. I've seen maybe the opposite of that. But the spirit of the language to me, I hear what you're saying. Spirit of language to me was more like, hey, vice chair, can you go to this event because I can't make it? Or could you speak to these, be at a meeting at the board office because I can't make it? That was more how that language. Maybe we could.
I would maybe just make it like as requested by the chairperson.
Right, that's fine. And I don't think that it was super important to you how this committee was formed. And I agree that if there is a separation from this committee and the chair, that maybe has to be another alternative. That, right, there wouldn't be a separation if the chair could just sit there and appoint everybody. I think I threw out the idea. I don't love having to add more in, but that, if this committee, say 5 people, which I don't think it needs to be much bigger than that, I think bigger would actually be a problem. Those are nominated positions, and the board as a whole selects who gets on this to run this. And you mentioned that.
Annually?
Yeah, I mean, Why not? I don't, I wouldn't do it.
Not on an election cycle.
Not on an election cycle, that'd be a good idea. I just think then that kind of, makes it very transparent and very open, and you need, a substantial amount of people to support you to do that, and that committee would be made up of that way, and it wouldn't involve, anybody saying, oh, this person was here, that person was there. So those are just my ideas. But as what you wrote in terms of what it would do and everything, I don't think there's an issue there, and I don't think that executive needs, what's executive gonna do? Well, I hope the chair is equipped to say, well, these are the things that we should be working on, so that's not really a concern either. Okay, I keep saying this, but I know if we're all willing to stay, I don't care. Right, I see the hands. So Angel, Nilsa, Sage, you had your hand up.
I kind of just want to we're talking a lot about the abstract. I feel like we kind of agree on the abstract. So I would say we talk about the text, and if anybody has issues with the text.
Well, my thing about going through the text itself tonight is that it sounds to me like a considerable amount of people did not have a chance to really review it. So what I had said at the beginning was to talk about what may be kind of contentious. And I think that we've established that perhaps the committee itself is not very contentious. It was the makeup. And I feel like maybe we're circling around to something that maybe we're getting somewhere with that. What I would advise, and here's my thing, the homework will be to read this language, to make your notes if you have a problem with it. If you don't make a note or say something, then I'm gonna just assume that you did not have an issue with it. Because I don't think it's the text. A lot of this text is just cleaning up and crossing out of language. We said that earlier. I think that the gist of this is the board oversight committee, which doesn't seem to be an issue, but maybe the composition, maybe that's something we can all think about in the meantime too, right? We've heard some different ideas, and ultimately, it's the idea that the most people want to support that's going to be the idea we go with, right? And that's the beauty of all of this. So, yeah, no problem. So, I don't know if we're all okay with kind of that direction in terms of, it just seems like a little futile to me to sit here now and go through all this. But now you're all going to have a considerable amount of time to do that homework. So Nilsa, Jessica, and then Jessica. I feel like you want to say something, and then let's do the other thing.
No, it's.
Not Angel.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right. Well, I did say I wanted a vice chair, so somebody could help me out here. Angel, go ahead.
So I just have a question. It's touching on what you said. Is there a process, the process, right? We were talking about voting, and you're not gonna deny, but you said about ideas. What about members who are interested in being part of this, to write down a statement and give their qualifications, maybe to the executive, to vet, right? And say, we got these 10 applications, we have for 5 members, and we need someone that has, let's say, HR experience. And so I'm gonna use Jul's name. Jul has HR experience, and we need someone who has mediation and law experience. And Sage has this, right? Let's say we weren't sharing it. Sage has this, and Jessica. And so that may be the first thing that executive could do, if that's a thing, right? With the chair and all that, where they will actually vet these applications or stuff, and then constitute 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people that they feel could do the work as outlined, to then be presented to the board, to then have them voted on.
Well, that's fair. That's kind of like an election. And you, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I do believe you mentioned, maybe not the whole thing, but people kind of applying for it. I believe you had said that at one of the meetings.
So my kind of thought is that an electoral aspect could be consolidated into just saying that's what the vice chair does now. And people in the future would vote for the vice chair based off of these are the responsibilities of the vice chair.
And the members?
Hmm?
And the members too.
And the members too.
Would that be an applications process? so that you can get, the people with, let's say, not the best qualifications, but the more rounded qualifications based on the outline?
Yeah, so one thought that I had, and this could also just be baked into like the idea that the vice chair or the chair of the board oversight committee submits nominations to the chair to appoint, is that how the vice chair gets those nominations is that people apply, like who wants to be on this committee. If you're interested, email the vice chair why you think you should be on it. The vice chair is like, okay, this person, you know, is a professional like mediator or something, or whatever qualifications we think are important, which could get put into the committee's operating rules, maybe before those like additional 2 people are appointed. And those rules would be ratified with a full board, so everybody would be like, okay, I'm down with this. And then the chair, just to like give the chair some power, and also the convention of the chair actually appoints people to each committee. The chair is who picks like of these nominations, and I don't care how many it is. Like, I just think maybe not that many people will want the job of serving on this committee, so maybe only 2 people will apply. And so I don't want to say like the vice chair will submit 5, because that's,
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
I don't know if they're gonna get that. But I also think, you know, the vice chair shouldn't have the discretion of like 5 or 2 if they do get 5, like, so.
Right. Look, if whatever we decide on, if we're comfortable with it, you know, that's it, consensus. And, you know, if everybody at the table can feel comfortable. I don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable. You might not always love everything that we walk away from, but, yeah, I mean, what I would say to everybody to consider is read all of it. And I you know, I'm looking at you too, because I consider you, you know, members of this committee, even though you can't vote, unfortunately. If it was my call, I would make that different, but, you know. But what I will say is, and then I'm gonna go to you, and then you, and maybe we're done for tonight. The homework is read this, read the whole thing. It's very nicely done. The blue is the additions, the red crossed out is the removals, and then the purple is the existing language. I think this is probably the easiest to look at. So what I would say is go through it. I don't think a lot of it is contentious at all. I think a lot of it's just wording things better. I don't think the board oversight committee in and of itself seems like an issue. I don't know if even how it's made up is that much of an issue, but I think that maybe we'd like to hear, you know, some ideas. I think ideas that have been thrown out here tonight are fine. And, you know, look, people want to, you know, let the vice chair do things, it's fine. But, you know, I just think maybe we should be open to possible other suggestions as well. But whatever we arrive on, you know, that's up to us. And then obviously the full board will have to make that decision if this is something that they want as well. So to me, that's all good. With that said, Sage and Jessica, and really, please, nobody else raise your hands, right? Oh, sorry, Angel. All right, Angel, Sage, Jessica, and then Jessica, I think. Sorry.
I don't know how you feel about it. To the idea of disempowering the chair, I don't think that anything that's proposed in here in any way disempowers the chair. But to that point, I'll say that I don't see what the issue is with sharing some of the responsibility. And that's the way that I read it. I read it as sharing responsibility and making that formal. I think we've ended up in a place that we're entirely too deferential to the position of the chair. And I think it's bred confusion amongst the rest of the membership that they think they have to go to the board chair, whomever that might be at whatever given time, for every single instruction. I think that's crippling to a body that's supposed to be a deliberative body, a teamwork body. Yes, there's leadership, and ultimately someone makes a decision, someone sets the time, someone adjourns the meeting, etc. Yes. The chair of the board is a facilitator. It isn't the be-all and end-all, even though they're elected to that position. I'm of the opinion that if that's what the body wants, then the body should never express any frustration whatsoever at any point. Because if what they want is to just cede all responsibility in every facet and in every moment to one person, then you don't really have a body, you just have an audience, and that has to be frustrating. If you end up with a person in that position that is leading the body in a direction that you don't want, well, it's kind of your own fault because you gave them all that power. Also, I think it's unfair to whomever ends up being board chair. That's entirely too many decisions to be made, and what the heck are the other 49 members for, right? There should be a sharing of tasks and responsibilities. Ultimately, it all ends up back in one room where you're all together voting. But ceding responsibility ahead of time, even formalizing that, ceding a responsibility, I would have joined that body. And I can see how members can become traded. So the point of the mandate of this committee, there was none. There was none. This committee was instituted to block an idea that was put on the table, right? And it was enacted with no mandate, which is wide open. So this committee could have done at any point what it wanted to do. It has coalesced around, to Adam and Ken before's credit, coalesced around a couple of ideas. Now Sage has another idea, and that's to y'all's credit, but there wasn't a clear mandate at all, ever. That doesn't exist. It's not my opinion. You can check the record. There isn't one. I think that, and I would always encourage you all, to the extent that you can, to include each other, right? To seek out the member that's quiet, to encourage the member that might be confused to participate, to the point that people are being isolated, whether that's on purpose or not. People leave. We lose a lot of good members because they're like, well, if, what was the name I used before?
Jill?
Jill. If Jill gets to make every
Well, listen.
decision, then what the hell am I doing here, right? That's incredibly frustrating. And dispiriting, who wants to work under those conditions, giving up your time. But if you are coming to a table and you feel that you're part of a collaboration, even if your idea doesn't end up being the one that's voted on at the end of the meeting, fine, but at least it's heard and it's discussed like it's been discussed this evening. But if it's, it's just this person says, period, my opinion that no one asked for, I think that's a terrible way to run a group. But I've also seen many members just get frustrated because Jill never calls on that person. And they just come and they leave and they come and they leave. And then lastly, to the point of expertise, my opinion has always been with every committee, you add people that are interested in doing the work. No one's asking you to be professionals. Otherwise, the whole entire land use committee would be only architects and planners. We have all kinds of folks. Everybody's voice is welcome at the table. If there is expertise, then you can lean on that they can help the person that isn't a professional, but focusing too much on professionalism or expertise, I think kind of works to kind of silence those that don't happen to have that particular expertise. Like if all human services were public health experts, then the rest of the committee would be like, oh, what am I doing here? And specifically back to the point about the vice chair, I've proposed before making the vice chair the head of the budget committee. Anything that does, in my opinion, that gives the vice chair of the board, who is elected to do real work, should be it the budget committee, be it the oversight committee. I think that's in the right spirit. Give this person something to do, right? And then they can step in should the chair not be there, should the chair leave or whatever, then they've been doing something versus they're not doing anything. I have seen a number of chairs here not utilize their vice chairs very frustrated. Why? To leave my number two, I use the hell out of Cleve, right? And it's to our mutual benefit. If this committee was just a them, and nobody got to talk, you'd all be frustrated. But if them's going around the table, what do you got to say? What do you got to say? What do you got to say? Right? Yes, he didn't want me to talk, but eventually, twice, I know. This is my friend. Oh, God, I'm just kidding. But
I can't look left, it's like Zoolander. I turn left.
I need a massage. like one of the hot sites. But just, that, giving that role and the other roles something to do that's meaningful and that could encourage them. The way I heard this conversation you had a couple of minutes ago about the composition of this committee or any committee, it doesn't sound that different than what we do now, where members are expressing interest in this particular committee. What it's adding, at least what I heard, is that, for example, in this one, it would be the vice chair heading the oversight committee, a formal role for that person in the selection process, right? I've had 4 chairs now. They've done it different ways, right? I'll go in ancient history so no one currently on the board gets offended. But when Matthew was here a long time ago, he didn't make the decisions unilaterally. He would speak to the staff. Hey, how's Jessica Morris doing? She's going to be leading this committee, whatever. Where is she kind of leaning this way? And then he would talk to Jessica Morris. Hey, Jessica, I have this roster. I got these 5 people. I'm kind of on the fence on 6 and 7. What are you thinking? How's their attendance been? Are they participating? Are they, weighing in? That kind of thing. And then he would take it back and make the final decision. That hasn't always happened, which has resulted in members being like, what the hell is going on? And staff also being like, what the hell is going on? And chairs being like, I said, don't put Sage on the committee. And then there's Sage, right? No one has said that. That's why I picked you. No one has said that.
Jill.
Yeah, Jill said.
Sage could take it.
You know what I mean?
You can use my name.
That collaboration, that inclusion, people like that, they appreciate that, it gets them kind of, if you're just throwing people at them, we have chairs currently that they're like, what the hell does this person do back on my committee? I told you, and that kind of, affects morale. So the way I heard it, maybe is the one I wasn't intended, but the way I heard it is more inclusion in the composition of committees. Ultimately, yes, it's still the board chair's responsibility as delineated in the bylaws, but that there be a formal, you have to take this step, not just pick, but actually talk to these people, these chairs, and hey, again, I got these 7 names. I know we're doing 5 spots. What do you think? I think that's to the good.
All right, before I go to Jessica, I think that the spirit of this is that it's a community board, right? And I've said at other meetings, if it was one person, we don't only need one person. And I think as a committee chair, I'll speak as a committee chair, I want my committee to be engaged and do the work. It's a lot of stuff to do by yourself. So the more we get people involved, and we've seen that we've had a lot of turnover with new members, right? We know that. I'm confident in this group, but I think that as much as they have to be up to the challenge, we have to figure out ways to engage everybody. So if this is going to get people engaged and make everybody feel like I don't have to just look up at the stage and defer that one person, then I think it's in the spirit of going in the right direction. And I'm happy with how everybody handles tonight. I know we might not have gotten into particulars, but I actually think this was very productive. I think maybe we got the hard part done, right? So Jessica, do you have any thoughts on this? And then I'd love for Angel to come back in the room and write.
Well, I have a comment.
Go ahead. All right.
Oh, well, I don't, you could go.
Well, I don't want to save her for last, but it's only because she's going to also do the next thing. So
She's been working on that drawing.
all right, well.
It's a mess now. It was good for a minute, but I need a couple pages.
I have a clarifying question. Jessica doesn't need to necessarily do something for a vote. Wouldn't your plan be to just make the change here and then put it in front of everybody? Or
Yeah, I just want her to put the language together.
Right, but I guess why does it need to be voted on? Or are you thinking this needs to be done as soon as possible?
I just like being seated to last, to be honest.
Well, that's fine.
No,
I'm just talking about the voting part.
But I.
You mean on the elections?
Inserting those 2 words, can't Sage just do that?
Is that what we're voting?
I mean, it's not a rush in that we don't have an election coming up.
Right.
I also just wanted to send something back to the full board, so we have a product that's come out here. There's a lot of product that's gonna come, but people get you know what I mean? At least we have something, but I just have a clarifying question. You know what,
I'm not looking to notify the board.
No, I agree. You know what, then, that's actually a great idea. Sage, if you 2 could collaborate, it's 2 words, but I'd like for you to still give your input, because it was.
Already
your
put
idea.
them in.
You already did?
I don't think it's, it's not worth the amount of effort.
To do
that the
it
board-
separately,
that
okay.
the board office would have to go through, to add 2 words to then change again in this
Fair enough.
manner. And we've made the decision, interpreted the bylaws on those grounds already, and have avoided any egregious contesting. I am here bringing that to the table after a very diplomatic and professional conversation about disagreeing with it in principle, but understanding it as we're moving forward. And so I'm bringing it to the table. So if the change happens, that's all we're looking for, to avoid potential confusion in the future.
Okay.
So it doesn't have to happen now, it doesn't have to happen tonight. My only other question is strategy and timeline. How do you bring this to the full board and have people understand it, and the strategy of the timeline? Because I think as leadership shifts, it's not critical to jam this through immediately so it looks, perceptions are so important in building trust around these types of operational adjustments. And so I would strongly suggest that there be some very serious consideration about moving at an intentional pace to ensure that board members have time to engage this material, maybe read the bylaws and get on board with the sort of fundamental aspects of what's being suggested in how it may benefit their experience in the end. That's all I have, no more.
Okay, I do want to say that how it would go through is something I've been wondering too, and we'll have to figure that out. Maybe Angel has ideas.
I have a question for Sage.
Go ahead. Well, ask Sage, and then Sage, if you have something to say, answer the question, then you could also say what you have to say.
So could what Jessica's bringing up about the full term,
Mhm.
could that be kind of addressed by adding a definition to like what?
That's
term
what I
is?
had said in the beginning,
Oh, I was over there.
or even the word
And
shall.
shall.
Yeah, like defining it.
If you have to do, like if you're reading it, if you're using these to interpret an action and make a decision in the moment, and you have to go, you don't know unless shall is formatted a different way, indicating that it's defined. You know, if it's underlined or if it's somehow hyperlinked so that I can go look up what it means, in that it means something specific, then I'm not gonna know that that has more clarity embedded in it as a word than any other word.
The word shall or the word full?
Shall.
But usually you know what is a defined term based on capitalization. I think in this, there's like kind of inconsistent capitalization, so that would be kind of hard to rely on. I would just either define something that isn't used as frequently as shall, like a term, or just put like, for the avoidance of doubt, shall means that this person can serve for the full 2 years, whatever.
Adding full twice in the body of the text means you don't have to ask questions about what anything
I
means.
agree, I think it should be added because if you come into something, you're still serving a term, it's just not a full term. Right, so I don't think it could work to just go to the definition and say, a term is defined as from Jan 1 through December 31, because you will have people through special elections who
Like
are
you.
doing that, right? And I think the spirit of it is like, if you, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I guess I am speaking of myself, like, I haven't served a full term yet.
No.
Right, so the idea to me is like, I could run, if I were to be elected, I could run again.
Yeah.
Right, that's what we want it to be. I think you have to use the word full for that to be clear, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's an important point that,
And Jessica's solution accomplishes that by putting the word full in there
Twice.
twice.
Right, so we think the word full then makes the word shall clear that, because we did have a deliberation at this table about what that word meant.
I still stand by that it's simply, my position is not that saying shall serve a full 2-year term is sufficient to disqualify a person who is attempting to run but would be terminated. That's my opinion on it, and I think if we want it,
Right,
not to rehash old history, but if we want it to be that way, just flat out say it that way.
Right.
Don't rely on the word shall in its legal context of how it would apply in a contract or something.
yeah, so if maybe that's something we should vote on, or did we already vote on it?
We did vote on it and did not go through. So if we're fine with that, I mean, we already took a position there. We don't have to do it
So
again.
right now, there's like a little bit of ambiguity around that.
It comes back to if someone, and I don't know if someone did, tried to nominate or be
Well,
nominated.
that's what I thought
right,
was
to go
why it
up,
was
and
raised
then
as an
you
issue.
had to
And then they get
adjudicate that, right?
We did, and we adjudicated it, given the reading that bylaws had,
I'm sorry, which part? The full too full, or not being able to serve
So-
out the full?
Oh, it was both.
both and, yes.
Yeah.
It should
Okay.
be there twice if nobody wants to ask this question again, ever.
But to me, that addresses the partial term. In my opinion, I still don't think it addresses the term limit or the timeline, and like when this ends and that.
But I think
ends.
there's, like, well, I was gonna also say, like, there is scenarios where you win, but you're up for reappointment the next year. And then there's no guarantee
That's right.
that you could serve the 2 years either. We know that typically doesn't happen there. If it's strictly
We're
a,
not gonna take over.
right,
But it could,
but it,
but it could happen.
but what I guess what I'm saying is there might have to be more language put in that would specifically say that the reason would be because you're termed off the board, not because then you have no way of doing it. Whereas if you had that, so I only brought it up, I know we
it's
voted
fine,
it
no,
down,
it's
I only
okay.
brought it up because it now became an issue again. But there is no rush on it because, we're gonna try to do everything one shot, but, so Sage.
I kind of want to like recenter us. One thing I would say is that the point you just mentioned makes me feel like we should not interpret it as like you must be able to do the 2 years because maybe it's always possible, even though probably not going to happen, that someone just gets like not reappointed or whatever.
Or like if I know in a year from now I'm moving to Antarctica.
Yeah, so that makes
Does
me,
that mean I can't run because I know I can't serve the full 2 years?
Maybe not.
Right, like it's stuff like that.
yeah,
I
so,
think we're gonna go around in circles and
Right.
circles, and we're taking, in my opinion only. It seems like there was work done going in one direction, now it seems like we're coming back. The idea was that you can serve 2 full terms, right?
Right,
So nothing says that first of all, I know because I remember Gail, and Gail was just a special person. Where, I asked when I ran, and she says, of course you're gonna get reappointed. We would never interfere with the leadership of the board. Whether each borough president feels that way, I can't say,
well,
but-
apparently it happened once, is what I've heard. It did happen one time that a chair was not reappointed. I don't know where it happened, but it happened. And so the fact that it can happen is as rare as it is.
It's under your control though.
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
you can't worry about that.
Right, so that's why I went back to the term limit thing, is that's one way we know you won't be able to finish it. And I think I still think you should be able to finish the term, or at least when
I'm
you
good
do
with
it.
that.
Because there needs to be continuity, like there should be like 2 years and you do it. Not, 13 months, then special election. I mean, that becomes a distraction. And I think the reason it didn't pass maybe was because there was the idea that people would not be able to run. But looking forward, this is actually fine because eventually everybody's just gonna be impacted the same way at one point or another. So I would like us to strongly personally consider that you have to be able to serve out the full 2-year term. And that would just mean if you're being termed off, you can't. If you're up for reappointment, if you end up, if you're going to Antarctica, but we can't, what are we gonna do about that? But, okay, so, Jessica, Sage, and then I think maybe we wrap it up for
I
tonight.
know it is a lot of process, and maybe I would like to walk back on, because God knows what can happen between now and whenever this may move forward or not. I think it would be a good idea to move forward on that change, independent of anything else, if it's agreed upon.
Well, okay, I was kind of advocating for that. I guess my thing is, do we want to do that right now? Because, we haven't even had this election yet, and it's not very time sensitive. So, I hear what you're saying, we don't know when this will happen, but I don't know, do we feel like, how does the committee feel about taking a vote just on that stuff tonight, or just?
I want to, if we were talking about the board, I still wanted to say my comment from earlier. I would like the committee to take a position that we are in favor of creating this board oversight committee, and that the next meeting is going to be about figuring out the details of like its composition. Because I want to like present to the full board that like we made some progress tonight, and it wasn't just more. That's my view. I think we basically agree that we want this board oversight committee to exist, and we are in favor of its idea, and that the next meeting is going to be us figuring out exactly what that looks like. Yeah.
Well, if the committee feels comfortable with that, yeah, as far as us having to appear that we're doing something, we are doing it. Just because we didn't put something out there necessarily.
Yeah, but I think it's like, not to interrupt, I think it's a step forward.
That's
if we
fine.
say like, we know that this thing is going to exist, now we are moving into.
I think as you've seen tonight, I won't stop anybody from doing anything. I'm only just giving my feedback as well as any other member does. Jewel, Derek, and then, we'll see.
I don't know if we actually said we're in agreement with this moving forward, that's all I want to say.
No, I didn't think so either, but I know some people haven't spoken. I guess my question now is, how many actual voting members do we have in this room? 4.
Valerie's on the.
Valerie's on, so we have 5 people, that's it? And how many members do we have? 7?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
I know we have quorum, but I guess my question is, do we feel comfortable with doing this, knowing that we don't have 2 of the members here? That's my question.
Doing what?
Like saying that this committee supports the, I guess, a board oversight committee.
I think we're getting closer.
My thing is, the reason I'm hesitant to do that again is because people still didn't really read it. We had a conversation. Like I said, my idea is you come next month with having read it. Let's just be honest here. Friday is when this was sent out in its current form. I can't expect anybody to have thoroughly vetted it out by Monday. And I know there are people or members that might still be hesitant. And we don't have 2 members here, but you know, I don't know. Derek, Sage, Angel.
Building off of Jessica's question about like, how do you roll something like this out? I would say this committee should consider not waiting until you're presenting all of the revisions at here, and to present this as a separate thing, not as a bylaw, not as an independent bylaw revision, but as like an introduction of the idea, vetting it out, hearing people out, maybe building on some of it around like what the possible procedures could be, because I do think it is a big change that a lot of people are getting time to like digest and understand. And so that's something I think this committee should consider doing, is like not presenting it in the context of here's all of the bylaws and this is part of it, but as like a standalone thing, which I think goes a little off the stage of saying like taking a position on we want this thing to exist and we want to continue pursuing it. But I do think you want to start presenting it to the full membership in some forms so people can like start to digest it, because it's a lot in a very good way. I hope I've been clear that it is a thing I support as well, even with how it's constituted. I asked the questions to give you an opportunity to speak for it, but like if it were me, I would support everything as written, right? I would want to learn more about how exactly it will function, right? But what's on here, I am in full support of. And I think I want to make sure we're able to get other people to that stage too, and not just like, oh, we voted it in, and now what was that? How's this going to work? What are we doing next? Is my take on it, because it's a big change.
All right, Sage, Jessica, Nelson.
Yeah, that's kind of my view, is that by saying we want to create this committee, the details and how we, whether we, it can be a big change, it can not be a big change. All of that is what we decide next. But I think introducing it to the board, saying we have decided that this is something we want to move forward with, that we support the idea, and I feel like maybe we don't have complete consensus, but I have heard basically like positive things about this thing existing in some form, and then next we figure out exactly what form it's going to take. I'm in favor of it basically being exactly what was written, just because it's already written. If anybody wants to like do the work of changing the words, then please, like I'm open, completely open for ideas. But I think like a step forward is saying, okay, we're making this committee. What do we collectively want it to look like, and how are we going to tweak this so that we are in some form satisfied with the next step? And again, that's like a process I'm happy to explore, however. But I think instead of like continuing the debate about like whether we want the committee to exist based off of people's ideas of like what it might look like later, we commit to saying this, or commit to voting tonight on like whether this is a good idea. And then next step, okay, what does this look like exactly?
So you mean just voting tonight on that we support the creation of this committee, but with no specifics yet?
With specifics to be determined at a later stage.
Well,
Or
which
like
means
next
no
month.
specifics
Would
yet,
you say
okay.
like this sentence, there shall be at all times a committee charged with overseeing the effective, transparent, accountable operation of the board?
I'm not saying we need to like propose a bylaws amendment now.
No, but like, I think like when people say, what is a board oversight committee, I think you have to be able to articulate something other than just what its name is.
Sure, yeah.
Right? 'Cause
I mean, look, for the,
people will look at the minutes of this meeting and wanna know, like, what did you guys vote?
yeah, I hear you. I skipped Angel again. So Angel, Jessica, Nelsa.
Yeah, this is become personal now.
Could beat me up after.
I was just gonna say, yeah, it sounds like, echoing what Derek said. And agreeing with Sage, the only thing that I kind of heard that was a bit of a hiccup on was like the composition. So I wonder if in B points 2 and 3, not tonight, can be stricken in that, and maybe that'll be more easily digested. And if there was a removal of those 2 officers from executive, then maybe just leaving them on executive as well, so then those 2 officers from both. That's all I have to say.
Okay, Jessica?
I don't believe I have any comments because we're at 8:34 and my brain stopped at 8:30.
Nelsa?
Because the bylaws mentions an oversight committee, are we actually really creating a new committee? Or is this the evolution of an existing committee to be further, like with all the work that you've done so that, I don't know, because, I just think that people get confused when you start saying, oh, there was an oversight committee, and now we're gonna create a new committee. So I'm wondering,
I think an evolution is a fair way to
I'm
express
thinking
that, because
that,
you're doing all the office
right,
oversight stuff.
you're
and it
now you're
wasn't a couple of-
specifying
Yeah.
what it should have always, let's say, done. Who would be, so you're more fine tuning what's there so that you can always sell it to the board like, and the absence of the specifics, this is what it's gonna be. And as we talked about what it's gonna be, the name will be addition, or, you know what I mean? Like, I think that if we make it like a new committee, in my opinion, just people will say, well, why you need a new committee? You already have this. But if it's evolved into the work that you've done, right? And with all the specifics discussed tonight, I think it's easier.
Yeah, so I would just, I completely agree with that, and I think that's perfectly fine. If I was to make a motion, I would move to, for the committee to support evolving the office oversight committee into the board oversight committee, charged with the responsibilities currently listed here, including,
Wait, which responsibilities? The ones that are already there?
yeah, membership development, receiving and reviewing grievances, conducting disciplinary and attendance proceedings.
Hold on a second though. We'd be putting those in, that we're supporting those tonight. Those are not things that I thought we weren't doing that tonight.
Well, this is not us amending the bylaws. This is us having the position that we are going to evolve the Office Oversight Committee into the Board Oversight Committee, and these will be the ideas.
Yeah, I wouldn't take it that far. That's too specific for tonight to me. We can say that.
But we've been talking about this this is what we talked about last month.
To say, may I?
I mean, I feel like we're departing, it's a departure from what we just talked about 5 minutes ago. Now we're making it very specific, but again, it's up to you guys.
I'm happy to make it less specific, but I want us to like commit to or vote on like, we want this committee to exist. Next step is the details. Like, I want to move us forward.
No, I understand that, but I don't understand the need to make it move forward that fast when we've had almost everybody at the table say they haven't really had a chance. And I know you say that that's been there, but I'm for the support of it evolving. The word evolving also means that it will be taking on more. That is the spirit. But to put any particular responsibilities in, and I'm not saying I'm opposed to any of them. I'm gonna echo, and Jessica, forgive me if I don't understand what the need is to rush it that much still.
Right, so I would amend my motion to move to evolve the Office Oversight Committee to become the Board Oversight Committee.
Right, and with the, what do you call it? Because I want to give you something extra with to expand on the duties and responsibilities of the Office Oversight Committee. So you're essentially saying that it's going to encompass more than what it currently does, right?
Could we use this header that's,
Read me the
there
header,
shall be
please.
at all times a committee charged with overseeing the effective, transparent, and accountable operation of the board.
That's good enough. Yeah, I like
Okay,
that.
so a
Okay.
motion, can I make that motion?
You can make that
I
one.
move for the committee to support the evolution of the Office Oversight Committee into the Board Oversight Committee, which shall at all times be charged with overseeing the effective, transparent, and accountable operation of the board.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Just a point of clarification, and include some of the things that we've been talking about that are
Not now.
additional?
No.
Not now, understood.
Do I have a second? Well, I know I keep looking, but you guys can't vote. No. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Second by Jessica. Angel, just do me a favor, take roll because we have people online and that always becomes an issue.
Jose Morano. Not here. Madam Briha.
Yes.
Bill Jones.
No.
Sage Mason.
Yeah.
Jessica Morris.
Yes.
Valerie Monte.
No,
Asher Rodriguez.
No.
3 yeses, the motion carries.
Okay.
3-2.
All right. I think that's gonna be it. Let me see, right? Old business, none. New business, none. Roll call, please. I know we just voted, but.
It's okay. Oops, I put it on the wrong place. This should be 1, and this should be roll call. Jose Altamirano, Madam Briha,
Present.
Joe Jones.
Here.
Sage Mason,
Here.
Jessica Morris,
Here.
Valerie Ponte,
here.
Asher. We have 4.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Meeting's adjourned.
For next steps, what should happen